What's up, Reef Builders? Welcome back to another episode of the Reef Therapy Podcast. This is episode 133, brought to you by Cali Kid Corals, the ultimate coral experience. Today, I'm joined by Richard Ross, I can't talk, of Reef Beef, and we're going to be discussing nutrient levels in your reef tank. Richard, how are you doing? What are you up to today?
I'm good. What am I doing today? I'm running around like crazy. I had a consult with somebody about flow just before this. That was really fun. Flow, but we're not talking about flow today, so we won't talk about that some more. And just doing stuff in the lab and in the tank, in the display. Good stuff.
You got any babies yet? When's the spawning due?
Spawning for the Acropora or Acropora will be in October, November, or December, probably November. And then I've been playing with Hemphrichian anemones, which are the coolest damn things in the world. And one of them is splitting. They're the weirdest things I've ever actually dealt with. I don't really have a feel for them being happy or unhappy yet. So, but one has got two mouths now, so it will split. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, the ones that Chris Cap, I don't know if those are Hemphrichis or not, the ones that Chris Cap has at his shop, but I didn't realize that they split. The first time I walked in, I was like, he just had like 50 of them in the tank. The coolest thing ever.
They are so cool. I have one of his. He sent me one I was very happy with. And I think there's a bunch of anemones that are called Hemphrichi, Thaliaster or something like that. I want to talk to Ben Titus about that actually and figure out, because I've got at least two species that are called in my tank that are called the same thing. So
I want to do hellfires. There's been a bunch of really cool hellfires coming in, and I think I'm going to set up a tank with hellfire only.
I've got one tiny red one. They're really weird.
I want a tank. I want a section, like probably here, of stuff that can really harm me, do bodily harm.
Yeah, you want the deadly garden.
Yes, I want like a blue ring octopus. I want a hellfire tank, a tank of like Palithoa grandis. Get like a box jellyfish and a chrysal or something. Just crazy stuff. I don't know. Bobbit worm.
They can't harm you, but that's okay.
I know. They look scary though.
They look so scary.
Like Palithoa doesn't look scary, but bobbit worm looks terrifying. So that's like I could keep them together even. That'll be the scary part of that tank. Yeah.
I had a dream about bobbit worms the other day, which I do from time to time because we were trying to catch one for display. And so I'm one of the two people I ever heard of who've had their hand on a live one. And I had this dream that we were able to pull it out of the burrow and that the jaws were like just nothing. It was like, Dixie cup plastic. And I woke up going, oh, that was a dream. That's a shame.
I don't know if I'd want to grab one. That'd be
It was pretty interesting. It's like grabbing, the guy wires on telephone poles.
Yeah.
It's like grabbing a steel wire. Yeah, they're strong. And then it was in my hand and it was like, no. And then it was gone. Just ripped right out.
Oh, that's good. It didn't like bite you.
No, did not. Although that would be a better story. So maybe I should start saying that it bit me.
I had to have an eye patch on. Like I lost an eye to that thing. Well, speaking of things that can bite, I think we should detour into today's topic, which is there harm to high nutrients in our reef tank? And you've got kind of a hot take on this, which you've talked about in the past. Why don't you give us your opinion on what people's ideal nitrate and phosphate levels should be?
Man, I get into trouble for this all the time. I don't think there's an answer to that question. I think every box of water that we have is different, and that our animals are very, very plastic and can adapt to very many different parameters. And I think that's the magic of my spectrumness, is that I see these kind of broad things like that. It's when people say, well, this method works. It's like, well, all these other methods work and all these other methods don't work. So something's going on that gives us such a wide range of possibilities in reef tanks for successful bomber, awesome tanks, And no, I guess if you were trying to keep the most delicate of delicates, I would have a different answer. But I'm often thinking about just for most people. And I think for most people are way too caught up in numbers of anything. Lithium. How much lithium is actually bad? It doesn't look like we've reached a number yet.
Not yet.
I know Chris Jury, who'll be at Reef Retreat with us, has got some real opinions on this kind of stuff. I was talking to him the other day. So that'll be an interesting conversation. But we're talking about someone who's not here. Yeah, I think people are just too worried about it. And it's the same thing as when phosphate control became available in the 2003, when all of a sudden, before 2003, nitrate was the devil, was the worst thing in the world. And everything was geared around how to fight nitrate, how to not have nitrate factories in your socks or in your trickle filters, and how to keep nitrate down. And we knew about phosphate because we could test it, but there was nothing we could do. Water changes didn't seem to make a difference at all. And then GFO came on the market for us. And all of a sudden, phosphate was the devil. And it was like, bring down your phosphate. And we had bomber tanks before that without caring about the phosphate. So that kind of got me thinking about the whole thing. And when I got super lazy with my job and let my phosphate go crazy in my tank, I didn't really notice a difference. So, some kind of reasonable level, I think, makes kind of sense. I get nervous when mine starts. I don't want mine to be above 0.5 nowadays. It used to be my phosphate. It used to be 1.3, excuse me. And I don't know if I really see a difference or not, a practical difference. I mean, is the skeleton growing faster? Sure. But at what percentage? And does it matter? What are you doing? Did that answer your question, or did I just babble on into nothing?
No, I think it answered my question. I think for people that have not heard your old talks, maybe explain, you kind of talk about like the different environmental shifts on reefs that have happened as nutrients have increased and things like that. Maybe, because that's the thing, right? Let's say that you're right. Let's say there's not really, it doesn't matter how high my phosphates or my nitrates get. Well, then the natural conclusion is algae. What's the solution there? How do we balance a high nutrient tank?
Oh, with algae? I don't think algae's got anything to do with high nutrients at all. I think chasing nutrient numbers to control algae, I think, is a huge snipe hunt. I think it doesn't matter because algae needs very little to survive, right? There's algae will grow, saltwater algae, this is hyperbolic, will grow, in a puddle next to your tank. And there's algae all over wild reefs, which have, if we're going to use wild reefs as the numbers, our baseline numbers, our baseline ultimate perfectness, which makes some kind of sense, people forget that there's algae everywhere on the wild reef. And the only reason you don't see it is because stuff eats it all the time, constantly. If there wasn't stuff to eat it all the time, we would have eutrophic reefs. The algae would take over. Right. So the algae is there and it's growing, in that nitrate of less than 0.02 and that phosphate of less than 0.02 as well. I guess those are the numbers that are currently seem to be what's going on wild reefs. So the algae is growing anyway. The algae will take over at numbers like that. And when we see, I'm of the belief that when we see impacted reefs by human stuff, runoff, and things like that, we're seeing multiple effects, and we're blaming the nutrient levels for it. Now, the nutrient levels, I'm sure, can help. Elevated nutrient levels can help it boom, but that's not what's causing it. It's there anyway. I think removal of herbivores is really what we see when we see things shift. It's not just that the whole ecosystem shifts. It's not just that we get more nitrite or phosphate from this runoff. It's that people eat all the parrotfish, or sharks stop coming in. And so when you got sharks stop coming in, then you've got these those jackass damselfish that farm that farm algae on coral that go crazy. I saw that in French Polynesia a few years ago. On reefs that were sharks, the algae farmer fish weren't there in great numbers. On reefs where there were no sharks, it was legion. They were just everywhere. So I think the algae grows anyway, and that we're trying to make a causal connection between high algae levels and high nutrient levels. And I guess I should say that's not necessarily the case. Some people that I take seriously, they're serious people, and they're, they say they see differences when they change the phosphate or the nitrate levels, and you have to give that some credence. But the idea that, it's a magic bullet, that if I could just get my phosphate under control or my nitrate under control, I would have no algae. We've seen too many counterexamples of that, right? My spectrum brain, again, won't let me forget about all the examples of the people who lowered their phosphate, lowered their nitrate, and still have to battle the uglies and algae and can't do anything about it. So you have to look at all of the examples, not just the ones that seem to work from somebody. It's much wider than that.
I mean, yeah, I think of turf scrubbers, right? People grow turf algae in a controlled box to keep ultra low nutrients. The turf algae is still growing, even though, it could be absorbing all the input, but even people that then will decrease input, like there's people that do the catch-all solution of, all right, we're going to add a turf scrubber, we're going to stop input as well. And then they have both, and the turf algae still grows. There's stuff like bryopsis, bubble algae, lots of different species of algae will grow. Like you said, even if there's close to nothing in the tank, they can thrive and with very low systemic nutrient values. So I think there's a lot of credence to what you're saying with that. And yeah, it probably is a herbivore problem, at least partially, for sure.
Partially. Corals suck at life, right? They've been around for a while. They need very specialized kind of environment. Algae does not suck at life. Algae is the cockroach of the ocean. It can't be stopped, and it's what helped make everything too. So to forget how well algae can survive on almost nothing, I think is a mistake. And I think phosphate's a really interesting one for me. I started dosing low doses of lanthanum into my skimmer 4 or 5 years ago over time, with the idea of, sequestered phosphate. Could I get ahead of that? And I've eventually gotten ahead of it. And now, with the advent of automatic phosphate testers, which I don't think, they're fun, but do you need it? I don't know. But for someone like me who's messing around with phosphate, it's interesting now that I can see, and Craig Bingman told me this once. I went, what do you think it is? He was like, it's all the food you're dumping in your tank. Now that I think I've gotten ahead of the phosphate issue or sequestered phosphate, I can see, if I stop dosing lanthanum and I keep feeding, my phosphate goes up. If I start dosing lanthanum again, my phosphate goes down. If my auto feeders run out of food, the phosphate goes down. So I don't know why I'm on that tangent, except that's where I'm at now. And I want to keep my phosphate below 0.2. If it's below 0.2, I'm pretty happy. Because I've got so many mouths to feed, I'm just dumping food in like crazy. And I don't think I'm going to stop feeding things, because if a thing has a mouth, it seems like it should be fed.
So I'm trying to think of how to put this into words. Why 0.2? Why that cutoff? Why? Because initially you started with, it can get really high, and I like to keep it under check to a certain level. So yeah. Why 0.2? Why is that your cutoff?
Why is that my cutoff now? Because I can control the phosphate to 0.2 trivially nowadays.
Okay, so like path of least resistance in terms of management.
With the auto water changes, which I don't think do much for water for phosphate. I think they do more for nitrate. I think they do a lot for nitrate, but not a lot. About 400, 500 gallons. I'm doing about 8 gallons of water change a day. I think that does help with nitrate, not with phosphate. And with the low dose of the lanthanum that I'm putting into the skimmer, I can pretty trivially get it to 0.2. If I'm paying attention, which hopefully I will do that at some point again, I will be a little more aggressive on the lanthanum dosing and see if I can bring it down. Yeah. So the question isn't, does it make a difference or not? The question is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm spawning acros, I'm settling acros, I'm growing baby acros up for years in water that's got nitrate of 0.5 or 0.2 or 0.9. In the literature, it's 0.9 now. Was one time we did it. It's like, well, if the corals are spawning and settling and growing acros, how bad can it really be? I mean, that's really the question. How bad can it really be? And if we think that it's not, it's not the cause of your algae issue, and if it's not, and if the thinner skeleton is what I think I calculated it from one of the papers that floats around, it was like 8%. The slower growth was like 6%. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not going to get grumpy at people who do care about that. The only part I get weird is when people who are learning to reef are spending a lot of time and money and resources and getting so frustrated at chasing a number that probably doesn't matter to them.
I think especially like soft corals, LPS, stuff that's so like forgiving a beginner. I mean, I think often, like at least in the retail shops I worked at, people struggled with low nutrients, not high nutrients. And that's because they had a turf scrubber, a fuge, a skimmer, ozone, a UV sterilizer, and they were carbon dosing because they said, I need to buy all these things.
Right.
No, not really. Probably not. Probably not. My nitrate and phosphate testing is the automatic tester is being a little weird. So I'm not quite sure what the number actually is. I actually have to, on the nitrate, I have to do some manual tests to see, but it was like 2. It was like really low. So I've ordered ammonium bicarb and urea. But I can't believe those numbers. The amount of food I dump into this tank, because there's so many NPS in here as well, into the system, I can't believe it's not just turning into ammonia, pretty quickly. It probably is, but with the coral density you have, it's probably gone like that.
It may be, and now that the coral, the tank is in a chugging phase. A few months ago I had to do some major rescaping, and stuff is booming again. So sure, it could be sucking it all up. So I'm going to dose pee and poo. And
then the question is, how much pee and poo do you really need? And does it really make that much of a difference if you're already getting a lot because you're feeding so much? I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe it's negligible.
And it's the same thing as I'll dose that the same way I dose lanthanum. And I don't have numbers. I get in trouble because I don't want to give numbers, right? You've got to figure it out for your tank. And, how much do you trust your test kit anyway? And how good are you at testing to be able to test, to know that the test you did yesterday is getting you the accurate result in the same way today? Start really low. So, I dilute the lanthanum down and then start at a really low dose and start testing to see if I get a trend of it being affected. And then I know kind of where I'm at, and how much I can go up and down. And it'll be the same with the I'm going to call it the pee and poo now, the pee and poo, the pee and poo dosing. I'll look at your base numbers, which we know what they are. It's I think you said 1 to 4, and
it's like a 1 to 4, and that's like probably arbitrary.
Yeah.
I can't even find the paper I based it on. Maybe I just made it up. I don't even know.
And then you dilute it, right? So there's some dilution as well. And then you start dosing that. I'll dose it at, 20% of what you said.
Yeah, pretty much.
Starts doing something. So you could put 20% of,
Pee and poo.
you could put that amount of anything into the tank almost, and you'd probably be fine. And
Probably.
then just put it up slowly. It's not a race.
No.
It's not
No,
a race.
so I mean, when I wrote that article, the reason I wanted to have this podcast is because I knew your take on nutrients, and the literature, at least from what I read, was yeah, it's all about eutrophic stuff. I mean, that's kind of what everyone's talking about. So my thought was, okay, if reefs are naturally oligotrophic, low nutrients, then, and the problem comes when they're eutrophic, high nutrient, then why keep a high nutrient? Why keep a eutrophic reef tank? There's all this scientific literature that maybe it causes coral disease and they're less efficient growth and they're unhealthier. But then when the rubber meets the road, it's what you said, and it's what percent unhealthy is that coral? I don't know. That's kind of the debate, or what I'm trying to wrap my head around. And what I wanted to have a discussion about is where do we draw the line, I suppose?
Well, I think there's another part of that needs to be said again, which is we have, where the rubber meets the road, so many examples of dirty tanks doing just fine. So something else is going on. And I love that people are still interested and people are still digging at it and people are testing and trying to figure it out. And I think all that's important, because having actual answers would be really, really wonderful. Or it would be terrible and we'd all leave this hobby because
it's impossible.
Right. So I don't know, what's the right thing? It's the other, it's another thing I get in trouble for not giving recipes. It's, what do you think is going on in your tank? And you have to have some thought. I hate to use the word philosophy, but you need to have some thought of what you think is going on in your tank so you can react to what happens in your tank. My philosophy about what's going on in my tank may not be what you're thinking. And we see so many people take a little bit from Salem and a little bit from Rich and a little bit from Meckley and a little bit from Sanjay, and then they're just in hell because they don't actually have an idea of what they think is supposed to be going on. How much we could talk about mechanical filtration and doesn't matter, and if you think it matters, you should do it.
Yeah.
I want you to have a good reason for thinking it matters, because I don't think it really makes much of a difference. But talking to Steve Wiest, I went, oh my God, we've been listening to OCD people talk about their tanks, and because their tanks are good, we assume it's their OCD that's what's made the tank good. And it may not be. It may just be that oh my God, a little bit of mulm in the front of the tank makes me crazy and I have to clean it up. But if you look in my 180-gallon sump under the house, there's probably 2 inches of mulm across the whole. I call it my abyssal plain. It's not doing any harm to anybody.
Literal skeletons in the closet.
Literal dead tiny things all over the tank.
Yeah.
You can have, how much mulm can you have in your overflow, without it really making a difference? And now that I got the phosphate and the nitrate down with that mulm there,
it's just a bird.
I like to make it 2 syllables. Mulm. It's clearly inert, right? It's clearly not doing anything. So why do I want to spend time and effort getting rid of it? I don't. But I'm not gonna pee and poo on anybody else who wants to. It's the strong lines in the sand that I'm objecting to, and I understand that that's a hard thing because it makes us all have to justify our positions and our approaches. And
I think the place where there maybe ought to be hard lines, or where it makes sense in my head, is the difference between wild and aquaculture corals, right? So as you said, you feel like there might be something else going on. You're spawning acros. I mean, how much of your tank is aquacultured pieces versus wild stuff? You think you have a lot of wilds in there that have survived the onslaught?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of my corals are, well, cultured. I don't get many corals that have been in captivity for a long time.
Yeah.
Now, when I get corals, because I don't want two polyps of something.
True.
I don't have time to grow it. I don't care. That's not exciting to me anymore. It's to grow something small. The display, I want it to look good, and in the lab, I want I want stuff that's going to function. Now that said, I'm growing stuff from literally one polyp. I've got 4-year-old corals that I literally grew from the first polyp they ever had. But maricultured stuff, I have stuff. If I'm buying a colony because I'm rescaping, often it's a maricultured piece from the ocean that's brought in. And the wild stuff, I end up sometimes the stuff I got from Fiji. I got a bunch of stuff from Walt Smith, and that stuff did really, really well for me. I lost one in shipping and one that fell over and didn't like the sand, and I've lost half of that one. But all the other 10 pieces are great. Whereas I got a bunch of pieces this year. This is like the worst story ever. I got like 8 or 10 pieces of strawberry shortcake, which is, I forget, what is that one? Who cares? We'll just use that.
They're Australian. I don't remember the species. Yeah.
The common name. And we hit the part of the cycle where the temperature went up. And I just started losing them. They just started running. And then I brought the temperature down to below 80 and I stopped losing them. So I've seen this happen over and over again over the years while spawning with pieces that have been brought in. I think there's something gets triggered, some pathogen, the corals get weaker, something happens when the temp goes up and they become less robust.
Yeah, the temperature, there's a ton of data. I mean, that's definitely, Vibrio goes crazy, Zooxanthellae becomes sucky. There's a lot of data on that. I suppose now there's kind of a hole in my whole theory based on what you said, based on your anecdotal experience. And my thought was, okay, maybe he's having difficulty with like wild corals or something because they're going from oligotrophic to getting nuked by your billion-part ppb phosphates you have. But I guess not. I guess you've had success. So then I was thinking as you were talking, okay, maybe it's because many mariculture facilities are eutrophic now. They're right next to the shores. I mean, maybe that's the difference is because like still people I know have difficulty with wild Australian Acropora, for instance, that are like Great Barrier Reef collected. Maybe it's the difference between on the reef where it is still oligotrophic and it's in a bay where people are pooing and peeing right next to it, and there's like sewage runoff and like agricultural runoff.
Where the phosphate is 1 part per part.
Yes, one part like it's higher than your tank. So then they get into your tank and they're like, a breath of fresh air.
It also could be if there's a problem with Aussie corals. I don't know if you noticed, but the Great Barrier Reef's been getting slammed by bleaching over the last 8 or 10 years. So if you're getting stuff from Australia during the Australian summer, it's probably coming in stressed already.
True.
So then you just stress, and that's the cascade of hell, right? That's not a good idea. So I think there could be a lot of things going on, but I also think, if we had our reef busters fully funded by some dead person's funding that gave us $1 billion, it would be really, really cool to track, where the corals are coming from and what the levels are there compared to what the levels are here, and really track a bunch of corals all the way through the supply chain and the home chain and see how they do.
My thoughts are like, having this conversation with you, yes, the research says that high nitrate and phosphorus enrichment can cause a pathogenic microbiome and corals get disease and they die at this percentage higher over a 3-month period. But also you're right that they're incredibly plastic. And there's many other variables in these experiments, and they're doing them in the wild, in the ocean. Maybe there was a heat wave that happened during that thing, and that's why half of them died, because it was that third or fourth added stressor on top of the, maybe, I think that nitrates and phosphates can be a stressor when higher. I mean, obviously, as you said, 8% more brittle skeleton. I mean, technically a stressor, but maybe it's negligible. So maybe people shouldn't dose pee and poo in their tank, and they should just dose nitrates and overcomplicating the whole thing. But also, though, maybe there's some species that are really difficult to where they're so sensitive that 8% does matter. And we've just got lucky with a lot of the species that we have in tanks. But there's still stuff that just melts like that, and we don't know why.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because of that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I like the pee and poo dosing, or I like the idea of it, because the mind story behind it makes a lot of sense, which is great. Mind story is not a negative thing. Mind story is a placeholder that I came up with to hold. That sounds right, but we can't just say that it is right. It sounds right. We need to see what happens where the rubber meets the road. And so mind story isn't I don't want to dismiss things as a mind story like you were worried about people were doing. That's somebody bastardizing the idea of what a mind story is. It's not to call bullshit on something. It's to put a pause on how much we swallow that hook.
Yeah. And I think it's just like we talked about, I think it's a sliding scale, right? There can be a mind story justification behind something that makes more sense or less sense. And I think the stance that I have, which is in line and slightly different than yours, perhaps, is you're the skeptical reef keeper. I feel like I am an empirical reef keeper. I think that once I see a certain percentage of data meeting anecdotal experience, and in my mind, I'm that makes sense to me at that point. And that's probably the science part of me, to where I can still have that skeptical part come in, and I say, but there needs to be more data. But also in my mind, there's a good is good enough. The mind story has passed into the pasture of mind theory. I guess.
Sure. But that happened with Zeovit, and now nobody cares about that anymore, right? That's almost completely fallen out of use. I'm sure somebody's very angry right now that I said that, but it is definitely not a prevalent methodology anymore. But that did move out of theory. It became a standard practice. And now it's gone away mostly, I think, because the juice isn't worth the squeeze. And that's what I think is really my guiding thought with all of this stuff. So with these kinds of decisions, so the ammonia and the urea dosing makes a lot of sense as opposed to just nitrate dosing, right? Makes sense on paper and in the data that we do have for not aquariums.
And it's cheaper.
Well, that's the second part. But I just realized that the data we have for not aquariums it's probably important to put a pin in that. That's one of the places my skeptical stops, because I've seen so many things that just don't, that in the paper it makes a lot of sense, but then when we get it into our tank, it kind of evaporates. It doesn't hold up. But the other part of it for me is the juice is worth the squeeze versus the pain and suffering and expense of making the juice, right? So the urea and the ammonia, pretty cheap, pretty straightforward, pretty easy, pretty low risk. You can set it and forget it most of the time. It's great. It's the same thing with lanthanum dosing now, for me at least. Really low levels into the skimmer. We bypassed all the problems that people were having with lanthanum dosing, which is almost always overdosing. I don't care what dose you think you're giving. If your tank gets hazier when you're dosing too much. It's just That is a sure giveaway. But
Yeah.
it's cheap, it's easy. The impact could be great. The impact could be minimal, but it's not that dangerous as long as you're not crazy with it. I'm
It's a
all for it.
low risk endeavor versus
A low-
Zeovit, where it's a entire system you have to invest in. That's kind of
And you gotta shake it every day, right? Remember that? You have to jiggle the niggle every day. It's like, oh my God, I'm not doing that. Let's make an automatic jiggler. Remember? So yeah.
I think though that when determining if the juice is worth the squeeze, in my mind, that should be a question answered with data. And I feel like even Zeovit, right, was we didn't have aquabiomics back then. People weren't really doing like dissolved organic carbon or organic chemistry testing. Maybe Zeovit, it's the same thing as trickle filters. Like Bob Stark has been talking about this so much lately, but trickle filters are probably the bee's knees. They break down dissolved organic carbon. They look at that thumbs up. Yeah, it's a green. And then, oh, you don't have one? I'm on a Mac. I think that's why.
I am too. It's probably just confused with
your background. Probably.
Yeah. Who cares?
Do a thumbs down.
No, the thumbs up. No.
Produces
Trickle
nitrogen, and then it helps your pH, right? So it's like, it's back to what we talked about in the beginning. People, either for a marketing gimmick or ignorance, chase down nitrates as the problem to solve. Same with phosphates. And in that process, we determined the juice was not worth the squeeze for trickle filters. And we passed up something which now could be like the miracle cure for like 20 problems we have.
Right. It's super awesome. And it's also, is the juice worth the squeeze? Trickle filters. Oh, I lost it. Oh, it would have revolutionized the hobby.
The automatic jiggler for Zeovit.
The automatic jiggler. It's gone forever. No, I want this back. You were talking about Bob Stark and trickle filters.
Yes.
And how
I think the way to determine if the juice is worth the squeeze is by testing things. Because otherwise, if we just point and say it's not worth it, we might pass up really good things. Yeah. Example, trickle filter.
It's also all of these systems, the trickle filter system is one aspect of an ecosystem, right? There's many other things going on in our tanks. There's a calcium system. There's a pH system. They're interrelated, but they are different. System's the wrong word, but I'm going to use it for now because that's what I started with. And, perhaps in the past, they all weren't firing at good levels now, as they are easier now, if that makes any kind of sense. If everything's going along great and you add a trickle filter and it's adding what you want it to be adding, you're good. If some other of this aspect of that system skews, then your trickle filter could become the worst thing for your entire system. So it's all these pieces working in concert. And I think that may be part of the hardness of this hobby to get our minds around. And maybe why my as hands off as I can be approach is good. Let it do its thing and settle the hell down and get everything going so it just kind of keeps going, The lanthan keeps going. All my dosing is, whatever I'm dosing is dosing by itself. The water changes, it's all happening. You stop one of those things and all of a sudden you get this weird bottleneck that cascades into everything else. So it is, I think it's more complicated than we know. And the question is how do we integrate all those complications together to make a method that works for us? We're back to, again, why so many different methods work.
They're all tools that can be used for the same types of things, and they can all do the job. And there's plenty of ways to skin a cat. But I think that So I think there's like three types of reefers. I think
Oh.
there's the people that hire Ben Johnson that sit back and they let Ben do the work, right? And that's like there's a significant amount of people that are in the hobby but are not in their tank, so to speak. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sure, they get to enjoy it still. There's the people that are laid back, and there's a spectrum to that because like you're laid back, but also you're still setting up lanthanum microdosing and tracking it and spawning coral. So while you're laid back compared to some, to the average baseline of a beginner person with a BioCube, you are a rocket scientist. So
My
there's
tank
that.
is stupid complex.
Yes.
Simple theory, stupid complexity.
It's not an all-in-one without a
Yeah.
doser or anything, where you're
Yeah.
just doing like a top off. Like that's like the baseline, like the laid back. They're taking it easy. They're letting the system do its work. Then you get into like Andrew Sandler, Top Shelf Aquatics. We're going to tinker with everything. And I think it's all about the level of involvement or control you have, whether it's you delegate it to Ben Johnson, you lay back and you let the system coast and like flow on its own, or you're the maestro for that orchestra and you tweak everything you can. And I feel like the best systems I've seen are the ones to where you lay back and you let them go. As long as you have to have the initial involvement to set them up correctly with the correct understanding. But then once you have the baseline, it can be relatively set and forget with periodic maintenance. Now, I think that for the people that want to do that, they probably shouldn't worry about chasing nutrients. They should probably just have consistency, and the natural systems or orchestra players will sort themselves out. But for the people that want to chase that extra 8% because they're crazy and they're psychotic like us, or they are growing coral for a business, or they're like in a conservation project, or they just want to try to make it the best it can be, I feel like that's where you have to tinker with everything. And that's where truly understanding what each of those tools can do data-wise would come in. Because if we don't have data to quantify what a trickle filter versus a turf scrubber versus this does to every part of the system, we don't know how to use that tool correctly.
Right.
Not wholly. So that's where we're at, I think.
Yeah. And most of the data we get is really muddy.
Yes.
It's I was adding this while I was adding this, and I saw a small trend that looks like that. It's like, but which of this did that?
Yeah.
It gets tough. And I love the nuts who are doing nutty stuff to their tanks. I think a lot of people would be happier not being a nut, or not taking advice from the nuts. I mean, it's all interesting.
Yes. I think some of the methods make it easier to be a nut, right? And I think I think that there's benefits to being a nut. Like at this point, I mean, like the amount of evidence for minor and major traces, I mean, definitely useful to have them. But also, you could just have a calcium reactor, the good media choice.
Yeah.
You could feed Calanus to get your selenium, whatever, all for Reef,
I dose Bob Stark's TE Plus.
Yes.
Because it's cheap and easy, and I want some of those things to be in there. Do I want more manganese and iron? I feel like I do, because the mine stories about manganese and iron seem pretty good. But have I set up something to do that? No, but I dose some once in a while. I just want there to be some of everything. I'm not as convinced that the ultimate numbers matter. Just that there's some availability of everything within a range. And I think our discussions about what that range is really the interesting part. That's where the bleeding edge is how far can you let it slide? I mean, I remember being convinced that alkalinity of 12 was critical to the higher nutrient system I was running. And then when it slipped and it was down in between 8 and 9 and I saw no difference, it was like, okay. So
but also maybe it was because it would take 6 months to see a difference. So then it's like,
but then waiting a year after that, and it's like, oh, okay. Here we are. I mean, that's one of the anecdotal benefits to having a freaking 22-year-old system is, and being hands off is I generally let stuff just go for months and months and months and months before making any kind of major change. It's I just want people to enjoy the hobby. I want people to like it. I want people to have fun with it. I want people to enjoy their own tanks without comparing them to other tanks. Do you like your tank? No one cares. No one thinks you're a failure if you have an algae breakout. You're not a failure. You just did something wrong and failed. No, you just, something happened and maybe you weren't on top of it when it was small enough and now it's a whole thing.
It's a learning experience now.
Yeah.
If you're new. Yeah.
Even if you're old. And I think that it strikes me that the idea that it's a whole thing. When you see somebody who's finally come up and gone, I've been battling algae for 6 months and look, it still looks like this. It's like, oh, well, yeah, you got to nuke it from space. You're
reconnaissance time.
Yeah, your system has become eutrophic. You're an algae dominated. You phase shifted to algae. You're not going to tinker your way out of it. You've got to take some bold action here. You could have tinkered your way out of it earlier, but now it doesn't. So just fix it. It's not a big deal, and make sure you have enough flow. People are caught up in random flow as a thing, and it's like get the whole body of water moving. You can't just have pumps hitting each other and think that that's good. Make the flow change over the day and be dynamic.
Mimic the streams. It needs to.
Yeah.
Back and forth.
Yeah, I agree.
Talked to Joe Caparata. I went to Unique Corals and I talked to him about flow for like 3 hours. And oh my God, I feel like I learned so much. I was like, I feel like I got a good understanding of flow, and he humbled me so much. I was like, oh my God, I have to redo everything in the studio. It's so wrong.
It's also wrong. And the main thing that I was just telling somebody this morning about flow was like, take every pump you have, put it in one place in your tank, and run it and tinker with it for 2 hours to see the different things that it does. Then figure out where you might want it, and then put another pump in another place that you like, tinker with that, and then you got to tinker with both of them, and then you got to tinker with all three of them. And also, we're back to that thing about have a philosophy. What is your philosophy of flow? If your philosophy of flow stops at random flow, that's not really helpful. But if you're like, oh, I want to mimic the tides, I want to get the whole body of water moving, I want to get the whole body of water moving one direction for a couple hours, then another direction for a couple hours, then I want them to kind of slide back and forth as the pumps fight against each other at different percentages, so that mixing zone moves across the tank. Now you got a whole thing going on, and you're going to get flow to every bit of your tank. But you can't have flow to every bit of your tank all the time. That's not how it works in nature. And that's not what the corals are. I mean, hell, I was putting a pump at, I was manually putting it up to 100% yesterday because I had some mucus on coral for whatever reason. And I wanted to blow it off. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. That's a lot of flow. But if it's on for 2 seconds and then off for 3 seconds, then on for 2 seconds, all of a sudden it looks like good wave action. So I'm going to see if I can program that in. This has got nothing to do with nutrients.
No, I think it does though, because I think.
Oh, yeah.
I think. I mean, it's nutrient export. It could be having enough flow, but yeah. But I think ultimately, like the takeaway to people listening to this, if you're newer in the hobby, the KISS method as your philosophy, I think just think about what are things like in nature. I think that having nature as a baseline, like what's the water chemistry like there writ large for alkalinity, things like that. And then just having the hands-off, simple approach to things. And don't worry about the numbers. And you don't have to buy all this equipment to make it work. You can do, I'm going to set up a tank here that's like It costs $300 total, including the livestock. That has nothing. Has nothing. Has like a heater, and just like nothing. Like you don't need that much for soft corals to have like a really nice display.
No.
But to the people that this is an exceedingly simple yet an impossibly complex endeavor, depending on the pair of glasses you wear to look at. It can either be the most simple thing ever where you just keep it simple and it's easy and it's hands off, or if you want to tinker, if you want to be part of the bleeding edge, you need to think about every aspect and track every aspect and do your due diligence with it to generate usable things for the hobby. Because going and saying, I dosed this product for 2 months and I saw my coral brighten up, doesn't tell us anything. But with the tools we have now, you could have done aquabiomics, NDOC testing, ICP testing before, after, during. And then we see, oh, this is the only thing they changed. Maybe this is why these numbers have changed. Now we have something to where it starts a conversation. And then we can get into the word now 9% better.
Right.
That slow crawl is probably how in 20 years we become 50% better at keeping all sorts of species. But yeah, so I think that's the duality of the hobby, is it can be a science experiment or it can be a fish tank.
Right. Or it can be in between.
Yes.
It's it could be whatever level of that you want it to be. But being on the bleeding edge of this hobby is they call it the bleeding edge for a reason. It's because you're going to get cut. It's a dangerous place to be. And if you don't have an idea of what you're doing and why, you're just killing stuff for no good reason. You know, you were talking about DOC. You talk about DOC. I do a lot of bet hedging, right? So DOC can be an issue. So now I'm doing automatic water changes and I run carbon. Oh, I better change my carbon. It's been a long time. But those are my hedges against DOC issues. Yeah. Because I'm still not happy with DOC testing. If I want it to be faster and easier and everything, and I don't know how much I want to chase it. But you can intelligently do some squeezing to get your bases covered. It's the same as I want to add some trace elements and I want to feed things and all those kinds of I run a little bit of ozone for 3 or 4 hours a day as a cheap, easy, and a decent hedge. That's what my display tank is 150 gallons and my sump is 200 gallons. It's all a hedge.
That's a hedge. Yeah, you get the volume.
Yeah, it's all a hedge. I pump air from outside since day one into my sump. And now actually in my lab tanks, I ran a line all the way to the lab tanks. I'm putting outside air right into these tanks. When I was seeing the problem with when I was losing corals a month ago, I thought, well, pH could be an issue. I'm not going to measure pH in every system to check this, but it certainly can't hurt to be bubbling outside air into these tanks, and it's easy. So,
and I now think that it can hurt to bubble outside air from your tanks, because I've been testing volatile organic compounds in the air, and now I think that's a new rabbit hole, and I'm going to get an air exchange unit at the studio and never open the windows again.
Yeah,
so
well,
it's like
my house is not next to an auto garage, so
what it's next to, though, I bet?
What?
Trees and the wind.
Yeah, it's around the side, but
I don't know, man. It's the variable. Yeah. Pollen, VOC, it's organic in the air and it's organic in your tank. A DOC machine.
I'll tell you
have to up your ozone now to hedge more against the outside air.
Oh, turn everything up. For the last 4 or 5 years, I've had no seasonal RTN in my display.
But you just started bubbling more air now, so.
No, but that's just the display. I used to get it all the time. So so it's not pollen. Something else has been ironed out into an evenness that I'm not getting that seasonal melted corals.
You're doing your auto water changes in carbon now to fight DOC.
There you
So
go.
maybe it was the pollen. Maybe you had enough sequestered DOC that extra bumped it up to a level that was bad. And now you still get it, but you have the lower baseline. It doesn't matter. It's negligible.
Sure. And maybe it was from food. Maybe it was from overfeeding. Maybe it was, again, it's
too many variables. We don't know.
So many variables. So you go through and you even out all the variables you can. This what I think, you even them out, you get them running, you smooth them out, you hedge your bets, and you see what works.
You know what also fixes every single problem we've talked about today?
Pee and poo?
No. Well, pee and poo.
Salem's pee and poo recipe.
With a water change.
Oh.
Just having a nano tank with a water change, and then you do a 20% water change like once a month, and then there's your trace elements with the good salt mix. You fix the DOC. You fixed your really high nutrients. There you go. That's
the ultimate tank.
The ultimate tank is a 10-gallon cube with one really nice rainbow splice acropora, and then you do a water change once a month.
Yeah.
That's it.
I always tell people when they should start with, a 40-gallon cube at the most, anything smaller than that, and then just do water changes on it until you get it going. If you really want to be awesome, you set up a doser and do the automatic water change, and then your life is simple.
And I think ultimately, so it's funny because you mentioned how originally the plague was nitrates, then phosphates. I feel like the ultimate reason we're doing all of this malarkey in our tanks is to eliminate the physical labor of a water change. Now.
Absolutely it. It's that, and we're also chasing Addie's, closed system. How interesting will it be to not have to do anything to it?
And then we do 1,000 more things.
Right. Then we do 1,000 more things to do that. And I still got to do the math on what I pay for water and what other people pay for the same water and what people pay for salt mix versus the equipment to not do water changes. Is that thunder, or is that somebody pregnant?
That's the people who ran a car in the building doing other conspicuous things, but at the same wall. So I'm honestly kind of nervous. I don't know. I've got the windows open today. As I said, I'll never open the windows again. And
I don't want a car to hit the studio again, but if it's going to, I want it to be right now.
That'd be the time for it to happen.
Wow. No, that was awful.
It was a blessing in disguise, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I
redid the floor. It looks really nice.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. I can't wait for it to be up.
I'll finish the floor tomorrow. I have to sand and paint the rest of the day, and then I'm going to seal it all, and then I'm ready for tanks after that. To where most of the tanks that I operate are going to be, I do a water change once a month. But also, I'm going to have that one tank where I have $9,000 worth of equipment to avoid lifting 5 gallons of water with a bucket.
Excellent. I'm glad you're doing all that stuff. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, so I think that's the takeaway is people should do water changes and probably keep it simple. But if you don't want to, then you should drive yourself mad and spend a lot of money.
Yeah, for so many years, I was trying not to do water changes. Don't do water changes. Don't do water changes. And then I was like, oh, wait, I could just do these automatically?
Yeah.
Oh,
especially now, you could automate the water change. I mean, I'm really envious of the Australians because they don't have to pay for things. They can just go and then use natural seawater, and that's got all sorts of goodies in it.
I'm going to go a step further about not Australians, about water changes. I think any size tank now should be doing auto water changes because it's so cheap, right? It is just not expensive to do an auto water change. And it is so much easier manually to just bring in your jerry can of water and move the tubes around than it is to siphon water out and siphon water in.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can use any peristaltic pump. Like it could be very inexpensive. You can go buy one off of eBay that's like for like the weed industry or something for $50, and it's could do the same thing. The only like the decent argument I've seen against water changes is only a regional thing, and that is like in the Pacific Northwest and parts of Cali where there's heavy regulations on water usage. But it's like that doesn't affect 90% of people in the hobby.
I live in that area, and
No.
It's
I don't know. I lived in Bleeding Heart, Kansas, and now I'm in Colorado.
I'm not going to feed my dog because dog food needs to be conserved. It's like no, you got to do the thing for the animal, and if you can't do it, you shouldn't do it in the first place. I mean, I get saving water, but that's another one of those things. It's like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Especially like in California where, only 15% of our water use is residential. So it's like, no matter what I do with my water use, I am not moving the needle at all. It's not my fault that, the water's all being used up.
It's like recycling. I mean, if I go put this in a recycling canister, you know what that's going to give? Tax write-off to the oil companies.
That's right.
And maybe like a tenth of a bottle, like in 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
it's a shame. It should be a good recycling program. Should be great.
Recycling was made by BP in the 70s as a war against trying to have regulations. It's
yeah.
I think that's most of the world. Is the juice worth the squeeze? And I think the truth is much different than it appears.
Yeah.
And I think the water changes. The juice is definitely worth the squeeze.
It's so easy. And I don't think it's that expensive compared to everything else. And you're not fleece rollering and you're not, doing this and that and the other thing. Just enjoy the tank for what you've got. Get your weird animals when you've got some more time under your belt to know how to deal with weird animals, and, don't get an auto tester until you've done enough testing to understand testing.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. There was something else interesting in there, but I don't know what it was. It's interesting stuff. The numbers. I really look forward. I hope I'm still alive when we get a much better understanding of what the numbers actually do and how. But I can't think I am going to be unless there's some major breakthroughs in testing cost and turnaround time. There's so much to test now, right? There's microbiome, there's genetics, there's water quality, there's, there are so many different things that we can keep track of that are all interconnected.
I want to get an ICP machine here in the studio.
That's not a bad idea.
Like 10-year budget to save up 10 years of reef stocks and just like take like 3-4% a year and just eventually buy an ICP machine. I got a spectrophotometer, so I can do DOC testing now whenever I want. Takes me 2 seconds. So I can get a lot of data on that now, for sure.
I can't wait to hear what that turns out.
I feel like I'm just going to go mad and I'm just going to stop doing tests halfway through, and I'm going to say I'm just going to turn these all into nanos where I keep clown gobies and do water changes. That's what it's going to be. I want to enjoy the hobby again. I'm tired of chasing numbers.
I set up this little 40-gallon cube that was originally for metasepia and for some stuff like that then, cephalopods die. If you don't know that. They die. So then I had this tank, and then I started messing with it with these anemones. And then I was thinking, what else could I put in here that I don't normally keep? So I got some feather dusters, and I got a yasha goby and a shrimp.
Oh.
And then I got 12 sexy shrimps.
I love sexy shrimps.
And then I got 15 barnacle blennies. and the tank is awesome because nothing swims.
Yeah, it's just all perched.
It's just all, and then you feed it, and everything goes bing, 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 like crazy, and then it's calm again. It's but it's just what you were saying. It was I'm getting so much joy. I get so much fun aquascaping it twice. I changed it twice, and then figuring out what to do. And then I got barnacles to put the barnacles in, and the barnacle blennies go in the barnacles, and it's just really kind of fun to have this smaller tank to mech around with and make stuff happen. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I want to do stuff like that. I want to do like all worm tank. Keep a bobbit worm, all feather jesters, cocoa worms, the Christmas tree worms. I love those little things. They're kind of underrated.
Yeah, well, they're harder to keep, right? I picked up a Christmas tree rock the other day for this tank because, right, I've got nothing in it that's going to eat the worms.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not putting it in here with my copper band. Been down, did that by accident when I was stupider. You know, but what are you going to do? So, yeah. In the studio before you, Jake had some Christmas tree worms that were.
They're still here.
They're still here, man.
They're still here. They're still alive.
Off the hook. Super. Yeah. I'm so glad to hear that.
There's one of them. There's one rock left that's got all the worms, and it has the hermit crabs too.
Beautiful. I tried.
So that'll be the centerpiece of like this theoretical worm tank.
Awesome. I
want to do sponges too.
Oh, I just bought a bunch of haloclona to give it a try again. We'll see if it goes.
So sponges, when I went down the DOC article research rabbit hole, there's one article. It's like the newest sponge paper that exists in the world. Some dude did his PhD on sponges. God bless him for putting up with that for 4.5 years. And he determined that sponges are at least in the Caribbean, are primarily DOC feeders. They just absorb dissolved organic carbon through osmosis. And they don't even eat bacteria and plankton. So that means we just have to figure out what carbon sources they need. And you can keep sponges just with a doser and like vinegar.
Well, you know, my tank, you got to come by next time you're in the area. My tank is like this really weird 3D kind of thing, my display. It doesn't picture well, but it's nooks and crannies and you go in it with a regular flashlight and just all in the rocks. It's all sponge. And that's another way that I hedge my bets is I made the cryptic part of my tank in my tank.
That's cool.
And there's like nothing not covered with sponges. It's like all sponges and turbinaria. Not turbinaria, tubastria. There's tubastria everywhere.
That's even cooler.
And thank you. And sponges are awesome. I can't wait till we get to the point where we have to harvest our sponges. You know,
it'll probably happen. Like a sponge fuge.
It's a spuge.
We can't cut that with the auto jiggler.
The auto jiggler, Salem's P&2, and a spuge.
Spuge and the auto jiggler is the key to reefing, it seems. Have an auto jiggler for the sponge reactor, and it shakes the sponges free to create particulate organic carbon, which is coral snow. There we go. Right,
mull 'em. I've got something for an auto jiggler. When I was pretending like I wanted to do a master's, I had a thing made that would rotate coral. That would rotate a whole disc. It could be used as an auto jiggler, but the idea was, how fast can I spin the coral and have them grow without flow? Can we just move the coral?
I get there being like no shadowing.
No shadowing.
Imagine you just have one acro colony on this gyroscopic thing, lights underneath on every side and the top, and just it grows like a ball.
The other one I wanted to do, which I still might do, you know, Action Diving Sea Dog?
Nuh-uh.
The toy that goes in your tank.
Oh, yes, where it goes up and down.
It goes up and down. I want to grow acro on that.
Just have it completely covered. You could do like Montipora, like spagotes or something, like really fast growing branching thing, like so easily on that.
Man, we saw some of that in the Philippines that was on this reef where it just rolls around.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just the corals just roll around.
I've heard of people growing like Anacropora, like in SPS tanks like that. It's like a tumbleweed. It'll just like slowly tilt and stuff.
Yeah, and so you go down and there's not a lot of it, but there's enough of it that it's like, wow, this is a weird thing. Oh, I was going to tell you the best thing about automatic water changes, I think, is that I take the output from my tank. It goes into another tank.
Oh, that's perfect.
And that tank goes to drain. And so if I need to quarantine or treat or do anything like that, it just goes right into that end of line tank. And I don't have to do any maintenance on it.
So instead of draining now, this is also I need to just talk to Bob Stark. I've still never met him in person.
Dude.
We'll talk about that in a second. Yes,
Okay.
That's a perfect segue. So something he talked about was the idea that you could just have a nuclear tank to where you just put all of the dirty water in it. You have like ozone, UV, just like everything, and you just nuke it, and then just chemically, biologically, it's like a little water treatment facility, and then you put it back in the tank as fresh water.
He and I had a long talk about that last year, because I could easily do that under the house.
That makes it more simple than you having your lanthanum on your skimmer and also having your ozone and also having your auto tester. Just put it all out there in auto water, change, nuke it, put it back in.
Yeah, I just have to figure out what the nuking is involved in, and that will take some dialing in, and I want to make sure I have the capacity to bring that on before I set up 500 gallons under the house.
I definitely need to try to find a mini nuke method here, like a 20 long underneath a tank or something. I'll figure it out. I want to try it too.
It could be simple, right? You could. I mean, you probably would. What would you do? You'd run GFO or something and some other resin, and you'd ozone the shit out of it.
Like zeolite, GFO, ozone, UV, maybe like a flatulent for the mechanical. Let it settle. Like how you do like flocks and wastewater. Like, so have an auto doser like coral snow, and then turn off all the flow, let it settle, and then pump it back in. You would have to do maybe you'd have like an auto flushing thing to where then you get the coral snow out somehow. I don't know. Then I get to do manual maintenance. The flatulent thing, that would suck. You'd have to. There's probably a better way.
How do you do the organics to flocculate?
I guess you'd have like a peristaltic pump with coral snow, and then you'd have just really high flow, and it would flock it all. It would just flock it all. It'd be like adding it to your tank. But you don't even need that theoretically, because let's say that if you make all of the particles inert through nuking them with chemical and then UV and ozone, you could just put them back in the tank, and it's like food.
Yeah. Okay.
So you wouldn't even need a flatulent. I'm overthinking it. So like UV, ozone, GFO, and like zeolite maybe.
Why don't you just bleach it?
Yeah, that'd be better. You could bleach it because zeolite would take out some of the trace elements too. So you don't want that. So would GFO. So you want to preserve the traces, or you'll have to still add traces in. Well, you would have anyways because you're going to have consumption. So you'll have to add traces with this model.
I wonder. I've got Jason Langer, Foursquare Aquatics, sent me a scrubber.
Yeah.
So what I really should do is make a reclamation tank just with the scrubber on it and see what that does.
Scrubbers, I'm worried about.
All I want it to do is suck up crap.
So the thing is when algae sucks up crap, it then craps, and that creates DOC. And all the literature up until like 3 months ago was that the algae-borne DOC is what causes all the coral disease. But then there was a paper that came out that said, no, that's not true. But there's only one paper against like 50 right now. So maybe turf scrubbers are amazing. Maybe you do like a turf scrubber and then you run carbon on it.
Or you do
take out the DOC.
Yeah, or you do a turf scrubber and then you nuke it.
Yeah, you could do turf scrubber and nuking it.
Yeah,
UV and ozone would take out the DOC.
You've read a bunch of Forest Rower stuff, right?
Yep.
About all the Chris Maupin used to go on and on about that. He might be at Reef Retreat.
Oh, really?
There's a vague chance. He did all that proximity stuff about algae near aquaporas, and no, you don't want that to happen. It's really interesting.
There's that. I was thinking of, I'm like, Forrest Rower and Rebecca Thurber, one of his top students, who now she runs the PhD program at University of Oregon. They're like the two lead on it. Rebecca went into viruses, so that's what she went into. And oh my God, that's like a whole other, I'm not even speaking about that publicly. It'll make everyone afraid. We're not even getting into that one. There's no solution. We're just screwed. We're at the fate of it.
Yeah. What were you going to say about Bob Stark?
Well, I was gonna say, which you just said it too, is I've not met Bob Stark, but I know Bob Stark is coming to Reef Retreat, and I'll also be going to Reef Retreat.
Yeah.
And everyone else should come to Reef Retreat.
Yeah. June
6th.
the weekend of June 6th.
Yes.
6 to 8. And it's a smaller show. It's a show that's not like other shows. It's a conference. So there's no real cells there or anything like that. That's not what it's for.
It's not like the other girls.
No, it's better. If you like talks and hanging out with people and talking Reef, that's what this is. If you want to buy stuff, don't come to this. It's not for that. It's super nerd discussion. It's like if Reef Builders and Reef Beef had a baby and stayed in the same place for a weekend. It's
locked in.
Yeah, it's MACNA without the trade show floor.
You're on an island and you're locked into that island. It's Shutter Island for like Reef nerds.
And I need a sentence from you, by the way, and a picture of you.
I need to take a picture of myself.
You're screwed. I'm just using a picture of you.
Okay, just find a picture of me. You can use a bad one. I don't care.
Okay.
My sentence is, we'll be talking about the microbiome.
Okay.
Just like, we'll be talking about the usual.
Yeah. See, I'm so excited about this show because I want to sit there while you and Bob Stark are talking about this stuff. The hard part's going to be is which conversation to listen. It's going to be like that. And I think Meckley's coming. I mean, this is going to be it's going to be really fun to nerd talk with. It's just going to be great. I think it'll be really, really, really great.
I never got to go to a MACNA, and because I have to run around like a chicken with my head cut off with a Red Bull at Reef Stock and other shows, I don't ever get to watch the talks. So this is the first time where I can go in and finally listen to talks and learn myself, which is the part that excites me the most that I never get to take place in. I'm very excited to come.
Yeah, and there's still spaces. There's only like 125 spots altogether. There's still some available, and everyone goes to the same talk. There's no competing events. Everyone's going through the same thing to talk about the same stuff, to hear the same things, so we can all have bigger discussions about all of this kind of stuff at once. It just seems so dreamy to me.
Yeah, I didn't even know that part. That's even better. We force dialogue about a topic. Oh,
yeah, wow. and then we're all eating together. And so the discussions just roll over. I'm even guessing that there'll probably be like impromptu talks and stuff like that because there's going to be space and time. Why not when we're at the Saturday night party? Why not have a projector set up with a laptop and let people do 5 talks about whatever they want?
Yeah, that'd be good. It's like the TikTok popular PowerPoint night. People have, I don't know if you're aware of that. It's like people come over and they have PowerPoints they give to each other. And it's usually about vulgar things because it's TikTok, but it'd be a nerd version of that.
The nerd version of that. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm so glad you're coming. I get to see you again at least one more time this year for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited. So yeah, that'll be 6th through 8th, I believe. You can go to reefretreat.com.
Reefretreat.org. Reefretreat.org.
Oh.
Yeah, let me say cleanly. Reefretreat.org.
Well, cool, Rich. I do have to finish the floor today. Usually I would talk for 3 hours, but I do need to get that done, and then I have to go to Orlando all next week, so I'm on a time crunch.
Excellent. Well, you go do it. Thanks for talking with me. Thanks for having with me, whatever that means.
Having with me.
And I'll see you in a couple months, if not before.
Yep. You can see us both at Reef Retreat, and I'm sure that Rich will be on more in the future. Thank you for tuning into episode 133 of the Reef Therapy Podcast. Be on the next one and be there or be square. See you then.
Peace.